Greetings to Mr. Vijay and my fellow viewers. So today I am going to be doing a presentation of reflection for the course code of TSLB3363 Reflective Skills and Practice. So task 3 performance requires us to present a reflection based on a specific ASL teaching and learning content using appropriate reflective models and suitable reflection tools. So I have uploaded the video that we are required to analyze. So this video of Teacher Well showcases the teaching and learning session in a primary ESL classroom. So to analyze this video, I have chosen the Gibbs reflective cycle. So let me provide a small introduction of what this reflective cycle is about. So according to City et al. 2023, Gibbs reflective cycle is one of the most widely used reflective model in education because it provides a clear and systemic framework for analyzing experiences in depth. So the model consists of 6 interconnected stages, which I'll be presenting in the next slide. So in the context of teaching and learning, this model is particularly valuable because it enables teachers to critically evaluate instructional decisions, classroom interactions, and student responses in a structured manner. So when it comes to analyzing Teacher Well's lesson on natural disasters, Gibbs' reflective cycle provides an appropriate framework to reflect both on his teaching strategies and also the learning impact on pupils, while also relating all of them to my own practicum experience. So without further ado, let's take a look at the stages. So the stages are description of lesson, feelings, evaluation, analysis using maxims, action plan, and finally conclusion. So now let's take a look at the first step. Step 1 is description of the lesson. So this lesson is for year 4 pupils consisting of boys and girls, and the topic is natural disasters, and the focus skill is reading and vocabulary development. Now, before he starts the lesson, Teacher Well plays a song and creates an energetic classroom atmosphere. Then he greets the pupils and checks their emotions by asking how they are feeling, how's the weather, and so on. Next, he carries out a classroom management routine by checking the star points collected by boys and girls. Last but not least, he conducts a revision of the previous lesson, which is really important, by asking students what they have learned before. So the previous topic was about just be yourself. So students remember what they have learned previously and they are ready to move on to the next topic. Now, here are the key activities conducted by Teacher Well throughout his lesson. First of all is topic introduction, where he shows a new book title and asks pupils to identify the title, ask about who the author is, and ask some prediction questions like what do you think the book is about, and so on. Then vocabulary presentation. So Teacher Well uses pronunciation drilling and repetition method to introduce the key vocabularies in this topic, like for example tornado, magma, natural disaster, and so on. Then for students who does not understand the meaning or could not recognize the word, he translates them into Chinese for them to understand the meaning. So this improves vocabulary building and pronunciation support. Next is visual identification, where he shows pictures of natural disasters and asks pupils to identify them by taking turns. So this connects vocabulary to visual meaning and activates their recognition skills. Moving on to explanation of concepts, where he explains the meaning, characteristics, and differences of each natural disaster. So this really builds the conceptual understanding of the topic. Following that, multimedia demonstration, where Teacher Well uses videos, pictures, videos, and lots of multimedia presentations for each of the natural disaster. Like for example, there was a video of how the magma lava flows. So this makes abstract concept concrete and supports visual and auditory learning. Then we also have questioning and pop quiz sessions, where he frequently asks factual questions and multiple choice questions for students to answer individually. So basically this checks students' understanding and make sure that students are paying well attention. Then Teacher Well also infused game-based learning into his lesson, like blindfold spinning, painting wall, and scoring points to cater to kinesthetic learning students and also to motivate and engage students into the lesson. And last but not least is recap and consideration, where he checks pupils' learning through definition matching, fill in the blanks, and oral recall to reinforce their understanding on the day's topic. So these are the key activities conducted by Teacher Well throughout his lesson. Now let's move on to step 2, which is the feeling. So in this session we are going to take a look at 3 aspects. First, the immediate reaction while watching his lesson, the feeling about specific teaching practices, and to link to my own practicum experience. So when I watched Teacher Well's lesson, I felt really impressed by the lively and energetic classroom atmosphere created at not only at the beginning of the lesson but also throughout the lesson. So I noticed that the song that he played at the start of the lesson really gained people's attention and made them really focused, energetic, and prepared for the upcoming lessons. And I also observed that pupils really appeared comfortable and responsive from the start of his lesson itself. Now, to really choose specific teaching practices, the first one is the use of multimedia, games, and visuals really made the lessons interesting and suitable for young learners. And while these things are really captivating in his lessons, I also felt that some explanations were too brief. Like for example, when he was explaining about tsunami, he mainly described it as a strong water movement, while he could have actually explained it that the tsunami is caused by earthquakes and tectonic plate movements. So other than that, I also felt that some of his questions are too simple and did not fully encourage deeper thinking. So for example, some of the questions are like, what disaster is this, or what comes first, lightning or thunder? So these questions doesn't require students to think deeper on the particular topic. And last but not least, to link it to my own practicum experience. So first of all, some of the similarities that I find in Teacher Well's lesson was the use of multimedia, pictures and flashcards and visual aids to support explanation of lesson content. So during my practicum, in my lessons, I've also tried to come up with lots of multimedia presentations that suits students' needs. Next is the implementation of various gamified activities to increase pupils' participation and motivation. So in my lessons, I try to experiment with lots of gamified activities that not only keeps students engaged in the lesson but also provides them with the knowledge that they are required to learn. And last but not least is the need to simplify explanation when lesson content is too advanced for pupils' understanding. So since I was teaching year 2 and year 6 pupils, the level of their understanding is completely different. So I had to differentiate the way how I explain certain content or certain terms to suit their level of understanding. So that is all for step 2. Okay, now moving on to step 3, which is evaluation. So to evaluate the aspects of Teacher Well's lesson, I've divided it into positive aspect and less effective aspects. And each of these aspects are related to one of the maxims used by language teachers. So some of the positive aspects in his lessons are engaging lesson opening through music, greetings and emotional check-in successfully captured pupils' attention. So this aspect relates to the maxim of involvement. Next, effective use of multimedia, visuals, videos and games supported understanding of the natural disasters, which relates to the maxim of efficiency. Then moving on, positive reinforcement such as good job and allowing students to make mistakes created a supportive learning environment. This related to the maxim of encouragement. Now, the less effective aspects in his lessons are some explanations were too brief, like I've mentioned earlier, and depended heavily on slide content. So this related to the maxim of accuracy. Next, most questions required short answers and did not fully encourage high order thinking skills. So this relates to the maxim of empowerment. And finally, whiteboard use was less organized, making written vocabulary appear clustered and harder for pupils to follow. So this relates to the maxim of planning. Now, in the next step, we will take a deeper look into each of the maxims. So step 4 is analysis of maxims. So in this analysis, we will focus on the positive aspects. Now, maxim of involvement shows where teacher well maintain active pupil participation throughout the lesson through questioning, picture identification, quizzes and games. So pupils were not only limited to listening, but also they were regularly required to respond and participate. So this continuous participation helps pupils to remain focused and improve retention of new vocabulary and concepts. Next is the maxim of encouragement. So teacher well created a supporting learning environment by reminding pupils that making mistake is okay. So this classroom rule helped reduce fear of giving wrong answers, and this encouragement also promoted confidence, willingness to participate and a very inclusive learning environment. And last but not least is maxim of efficiency, where teacher well used the lesson time effectively by combining explanation, multimedia presentation, quizzes and games within all in one lesson. So activities were arranged in a smooth sequence without losing lesson focus, and this immediate application strengthened the understanding of concept. Also, effective lesson flow supported different learning styles and maintained pupils' concentration throughout the lesson. Now, when some of these positive aspects are really well addressed, these less effective aspects are required to improve. So here in this step 5 action plan, I have suggested several ways to improve them. So the first one is provide clearer step-by-step explanation. So to improve explanation by presenting concepts in a smaller and simpler stages. This addresses the maxim of accuracy, especially when teaching scientific content. So for example, when explaining about tsunami, teacher well could first explain about the underwater earthquake that happens and then link them to the wave movement of the tsunami. So this supports, teacher well could also support his explanation with visuals and simple diagrams. This helps pupils understand the content more clearly and reduce confusion. Moving on to the next step is to use more open-ended questioning techniques. So increase questions that require pupils to explain ideas rather than just give one-word answers. This strengthens the maxim of empowerment by promoting deeper thinking. So for example, he could ask questions like, why does lightning appear before thunder? Where these questions require students to think deeper about thunder and lightning to analyze their characteristics and answer. Also, teacher well could use the think, pair, share technique before selecting answers. So basically this think, pair, share technique is where pupils pair up and discuss about the question or the topic and they come up with an answer. So this kind of technique encourages critical thinking, confidence and the full use of language. And last but not least is to plan whiteboard space before writing. So this is really important, where he should organize board writing by dividing space for vocabulary, meaning and examples. So this improves the maxim of planning during lesson delivery. So for example, teacher well could use the left side of the board for the new vocabularies and the right side of the board to write its meaning. So using the space and in a very clear arrangement will avoid clustered notes, and this will help pupils to copy the notes accurately and follow the lesson content easily. So alright, we are in the last step, which is conclusion. So basically, the lesson demonstrated that effective teaching requires a balance between engagement, clarity and classroom management. And also the strong use of student involvement, student encouragement and efficient resources can increase pupils' participation and motivation. At the same time, when it comes to explanation, questioning and lesson organization, it needs careful attention to support deeper understanding. So here are some things that I've learned from Teacher Well's lesson. So first of all is this lesson and the analysis of this lesson really strengthened my awareness that teaching decisions directly influence pupils' learning experience, because the activities that we conduct, the way how we explain, is what shapes their understanding of several topics. And also the second thing is I need to continuously reflect and adapt my strategies according to pupils' need, because for the first step is to understand our pupils completely in order for us to strategize our lessons according to their needs. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope my use of Gibbs reflective cycle has analyzed the lesson well, and also the things that I've learned will really help to better my lesson planning and delivery in my future teaching and learning experiences. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.